The presentation comes out of a few months ago. I made a presentation in Hyderabad, and it is largely based on that presentation. I will start by saying the Constitution of India declares India to be a sovereign, socialist, secular, and democratic republic. I think these are the key words that I want to put it for you. Sovereign, socialist, secular, and democratic republic of India. At the time of independence in 1947, India adopted the then existing communication system having state control enacted by British colonial ruler. Mr. Nehru was asked when the constitution was framed, what do you want to do with media? He said, India is a nascent country in democracy, therefore it must be controlled by the state. And that became the dictum since then until 1992, which I'll be talking to you. The Constitution of India having gone through over 100 amendments in 65 years. I was shocked when I came to the United States that in more than 250 years of Constitution, there were less than a dozen amendments. We have more than 100 in 65 years. We continuously amending the Constitution. During 1947 to 1991, India followed a policy of socialism, having a principle of mixed economy, in which largely state, along with the private sector, invested, managed, and operated in the national development. This is something very different than found elsewhere. The basic communication policy of India that differed from the other socialist countries, especially Soviet Union, all the Eastern Bloc, was what has been referred to as dual face of control and management of communication in India, somewhat similar to the Chinese approach followed in Hong Kong today. One state, two laws. We had one state, two policies, one for private sector, one for the public sector, but very different than that. In India, while electronic media has been exclusively controlled and managed by state, the print media, film, and other creative industries of communication were and continue to be largely in the hands of private sector. You will be surprised that film was never controlled by British colonial rulers, nor newspapers. Wherever there was investment required, they didn't want to touch it. Let the local people do it. But telecommunication was something essential for the rule in the country they controlled. And that rule followed until 1992. After the landmark decision of the Supreme Court of India in 1996, who declared airways as a property of people, preceded by several changes in electronic and print media that began to take place with or without intervention of the state. To a large extent, these changes have shaped the way readers, listeners, viewers begin to differentiate between government media and private media. Newspapers have changed their editorial policy, reporting methods, and headlines. So are the case with the radio and television. This is something very apparent if you go back to India today. Ambani's will appear on the front page. Prime Minister will appear on the third page. Putting it mildly. Reporting about the political leaders and politics of country have shifted to reporting of film personalities, rich and corporate icons. These media changes have started occurring over 2 decades. Capitalism and market economy quickly deepened its root in communication of India. I just want to say that the one company that I directly have been involved with, ZTV, they claim to be Asia's largest TV channel. Gradually they moved into newspapers, filmmaking, and God knows how many more things, all in private sector. Not a single penny government invests in it. As a matter of fact, government takes taxes from them. And this is not just a lone case. There are several such companies in India. In the light of these observations, my presentation is to provide analysis of role of electronic and print media after economic liberalization in 1992. The analysis is presented within the framework of growing importance of policies of Bharatiya Janata Party, which is the ruling party at the moment in India, and earlier coalition governments and economic transformation that have taken place as a result of shift in controlled economy to free market economy, advocated by the champions of capitalism under the influence of World Bank, Western countries, especially United States of America. In the process of privatization is now moving fast in the stewardship of the present government. Present government is committed for all along privatization. I just heard before leaving that in defense now 100% privatization. In other areas they are saying privatization. So this is a major shift in the history of India as a democracy. And that's what I want to narrate a little bit. India is a multilingual, I don't have to say this, country which evolved over several millennia. Professor in anthropology department says 7,000 years. Our colleagues say 10,000 years. I don't know how many years it is. The forces of multilingualism shaped the Indian symbolic, verbal and non-verbal communications. That's an important point that I want to make. Continuous political, upheaval, ideological conflicts, and emergence of new religious beliefs, and above all, differences in religious doctrines helped evolve multi-layered communication in India. If you want to see some more about it, there is a book on Indian civilization, edited by Professor Elder. You will find all the details that I'm mentioning here in a nutshell. These factors also separately and collectively impinged in systematizing and sharpening a distinctive communication pattern at home, in the market, and with the external world. And I just want to make a joke, but this is a true story. The old little boy was sitting at home. The father told the son, don't respond to the telephone when it comes. And if it comes from my boss, tell him I'm not home. The phone rang, the kid picked up, and he said, yes, my father has told you to tell you he's not at home while he's at home. And the poor fellow was thrashed a little bit. I wrote this as a dual ethics of communication in the context of India. Very different with the rest of the world. It may happen in US once in a while, but not always. Today in India and its adjoining countries of South Asia, one can observe changes in language use from one district to another, from one county to another county, which is still continuing. So last count, which was reported 2011 census, we still have 1,065 languages spoken in India, which the number has reduced from 1,400 or odd in 2000. So we are homogenizing a little bit, but I'm sure new languages will emerge in the meantime. Hence, for a casual observer, it gives an impression of certain visual diversity in the process and method of communication within India. But somehow we managed to live with this linguistic diversity. Myth, folktale, and mythological stories have been intermingled in each region separately. And that has created a variation in the linguistic behavior. The characteristic of multilingual communication are that they enjoy a very high degree of autonomy within the linguistic region. Individual efforts to improve, innovate, and improvise each pattern of communication evolved over several millennia until 14th century. I put a date, it's a rough date, when the Mughals started emerging as rulers of India. and Islam started influencing Indian communication pattern at that time. Especially in the area of creative expressions, began to intermingle in selected linguistic regions of India, and by 15th century AD evolved a distinct Indo-Islamic multilingual communication, mostly in Indo-Gangetic plain of India. Urdu as a language that emerged. Freckenberg has written quite a bit. Gopal Elder, you can read it on this. The multilingual communication includes various forms of verbal, non-verbal, and symbolic communication and expressive arts in the form of music, dance, drama, ritual, recital, storytelling, and religious spread that expanded and matured fairly independently in each linguistic region, regardless of who ruled the country. After the arrival of British colonial rulers in large part of India, the pattern of multilingual communication continued to flourish along with English language communication. You have to read Mukherjee, Chandra, all the historians have said a great deal about it. The British arrived in the subcontinent around 18th century, and along with them a whole lot of new communication technology. That's a major breakthrough in India. Important among them were printing technology, followed by telegraph, telephone technology in around 19th century. Cinema and radio technologies followed at the end of the 19th century and early 20th century. At the time of independence of India, in 1947, India had a large-scale printing technology, film production. By the way, India is one of the world's largest film-producing country, even today, and a small radio network. Telecommunication were controlled with iron fist, like telegraph and telephone, and later radio, to achieve British colonial political ends. At the same time, print media were left to private sectors for their growth and development. But it was controlled very well. I remember as a child, you print a brochure or a leaflet, first you have to go to collector's office to report. It was printed. And the outline, the bottom line of the press will be given there, who printed it. And the press was also responsible to provide to the collector's office every information. It would not be out of place to mention that Indian Telephone and Telegraph Act 1885 remained the strongest whip to control, manipulate, and punish freedom fighters before India's independence in 1947. And I would say in the same breath that it continued until very recently in India. Even after independence, the democratic leaders used the same act to deny communication freedom to the Indian citizens. In independent India, under the socialist ideology, distinction between private and state ownership of media became sharper and competitive, in which state often dictated terms of the game and tried to monopolize the situation. I did this whole write-up and I came to this a small conclusion which I am putting. Broadly, you can take the history of India in communication terms, and I would say English colonial communication having iron fist control prior to 1947, independent India multilingual communication plural controls up to 1991, multilingual plural market-driven communication after economic liberalization in 1992. So that is the period that I want to touch very quickly. The first, I will take a very quick, brief note on this. Publication of newspapers and magazines required prior permission and submission of its copy to the British officials. It was compulsory, having power to censor and stop publication if thought to be against British rulers under the Press and Registration Books Act 1867. And I go on to say that these rules were followed vigorously until 1952. So the first change that was made in India was in the Film Act. Each film required certification, even today, for Central Board of Film Certification under Cinematographic Act 1952. In independent India, as I have indicated to you, changes have occurred, but it was again got into real serious problem in 1975-76 when the then Prime Minister of India, let Indira Gandhi, impose internal emergency in India. And I remember I was working on satellite instructional intelligence experiment. I went to Delhi to meet the official. He said, "Sorry, sir, I cannot talk to you on phone. Please come home, then we'll discuss." Phones are tapped at that time. I wanted to see my father, who was in jail because he was against Mrs. Gandhi. I was given a special permission by the Home Ministry with the intervention of Home Secretary to see my father for 5 minutes in jail on a personal ground because my sister was getting married. Those were the situation at that time. So quite a bit things happened, but thank God Mrs. Gandhi had to go and changes occurred in the country. Now I come to multilingual market-driven communication that we are in today. Apart from economic liberalization, the information broadcasting technology showed a path, including video and cable television, that reduced effectiveness of state laws and ushered an era of communication revolution in India. In 1992, even when the laws were implemented, people broadcasted from Hong Kong, Kuala Lumpur, Bangkok to India. Star TV is a prime example. They broadcasted, and you could receive it in Indian satellite, which was fortunately, or unfortunately I should say, fortunately I would say, I was involved in designing it 20 years ago, 1974, 75. It started in 65, completed in 71, 75 I used the same satellite. So, communication revolution and privatization of telecommunication of economic liberalization for the first time had manifold access and reach of telephones in the remotest part of India. National and international telecommunication companies began to manage and operate mobile phones across length and breadth of India. I just wanted to say, I was checking last night, again, we have about 1 billion phones, mobile phones in India, about, few less, because the numbers change. That's the second largest telephone owning country in the world after China. Market forces further transformed communication reach and access after the historic judgment of Supreme Court of India, which I just mentioned to you. Hence, it could be viewed as a techno-economic transformation and not just communication transformation of the communication driven by free market economy. The chairman of my board, one day I asked him, what do you see in the future? He said, 300,000 crores of rupees in next 25 years in the country. At that time, he said 30,000 crores. And it is multiplying. Just to not diverting, on an average, an Indian spends at least 5 to 10% of his real income in communication in India today. Even the little fellow who is a gardener in my house has a cell phone in his pocket. And I said, how do you manage? He said, oh, there is a system by which I can charge this for 10 rupees at a time, just for 1/6 of a dollar. And keep it going. When it's over, I go and get it charged again. Because he gets daily wages income. He has a daily wage income. Changes begin to emerge in multiple areas of personal and professional lives of the citizens as a result of this. A society that was lip tight. I would not speak in front of my father ever. I would not speak in front of my brother who is 4 years older than me even today. And my little girls, they are now adults, joke about me. If you don't listen to me, I'll go to uncle and tell him. Because they know that I cannot talk in front of me. That's the lip type India. Now it has become all-time talking India. Country of enforcement of age-old oral tradition of communication, because orality is known to Indian civilization. And telephone provided that orality in a much bigger way. I don't have to face my father. I can use a phone, tell him what I want to tell. In face, I will not do that. So this orality has helped a great deal of telephones. The other basic communication changes can be observed in the perception of media companies and corporations about readers, listeners, and viewers, and telecommunication users. Now they are being perceived as a customers, consumers, and media products as a commodities. This is a kind of shift in perception. Is a product. It is not a using machine. The entire communication industry became largely market-oriented and viewed as a business with or without social responsibility and media ethics. They can do anything to make little money. If you have to put a story on television, paid story, rule says you can't do it, the company will do it. Another major change witnessed in the post-economic liberalization phase includes drastic reduction in political interference and growth of regional political parties in the electoral politics of India. Now, almost every major state has a couple of local parties, apart from Congress Party and Bharatiya Janata Party as a national party. Unfortunately, communism is receding in India, and the power of communists somehow is dwindling very fast in the last two elections in India. They control two states very strongly, three states. Now only two are gone from their hands, the major ones. Emergence of multi-party coalition government at the national level between 1992 to 2014 became a phenomenon, and only after 2014 we have one national party controlling the national political system. It could be due to state-controlled communication transformation to enhance multilingual communication after economic liberalization. I feel that communication has played an important role in creating this state-level politics in the country, because they not only control party, they have their own channels, they have their own newsprints and other means to reach people. The state-level political parties and their sympathizers have further helped the process of multilingual communication in India. In unregulated media market, multilingual content generation, augmented communication technology, multi-channel television has taken a center stage in India. At the same time, rapid changes in the ownership have created uncertainty and aggravated the situation, so as market forces have not allowed crystallization of a direction of change in communication, and as a result, social change also. In 1992, when Narasimha Rao took over power as a coalition government, he was a minority government. He managed to bribe some of the other members of Senate members to be on their side to vote. The process of communication transformation had taken a quantum jump fueled by information and communication technology. National media and telephone industry had started expanding with or without direct intervention of the government. Of course, they were driven by profit motives, even at the cost of national security, individual privacy, and freedom. I must not forget to tell you, in this November 26th, when there was a terrorist attack in Bombay, the channels were showing every nitty-gritty detail what was happening. And the ISI officials sitting in Peshawar and Lahore and Pakistan watching these programs and then directing their people how to go about. 3 days later, the security people realized it. They then requested all media channels not to show them. Because that was used. They didn't have to do anything, just watch TV, how the forces are moving. They had bombed the Jewish synagogue in Bombay. which is now has been repaired completely, it started functioning. So these things were happening. One of my colleagues, Singh, while analyzing news content, found that the news reporting was driven by business considerations more than news value. Also, paid news often became headlines influenced by political and business consideration. But also now I'm watching that some of the channels are directly belonging to one party, and one is Republican, the another is Democrat. That kind of situation is happening. I was watching TV here also to see election studies here. Same thing I saw there happening. At the start of 21st century, in addition to national political parties, state-level parties also known as regional parties began to appear on the horizon of parliamentary democracy of India, though they were in existence prior to 1992. But the important point, they became more powerful. Many states are controlled by regional parties, not by the national parties. Emerging format of communication provided opportunity to know and participate in the regional culture and politics at the state, national, and international level. Anything that happens here, within few seconds I know in India, without fail, because it will appear either on my internet or on my television and next day on newspapers. Within a decade of economic liberalization, media and ICT carved out a new role within the framework of multi-party democratic tradition that was weak and hardly known to Indian democracy in the first 40 years of its existence. I remember every couple of years I read a book from United States which will say Indian democracy is going to fail. After Nehru, who? After Indira Gandhi, who? And this went on. But today I can say that's not possible. Freedom of press and electronic media was experienced along with government-owned electronic media. Rapidly growing private media with the valuable augmentation of information communication technology overshadowed the entire communication scene in India. I don't have to wait the Prime Minister to tell me what is happening in the country. I will know much before he will tell me. New tensions, conflicts, and tussles begin between press, electronic media, and ITC, government, and judiciary were perceptible all around, needing readjustment, restructuring in the ideological socialist constitution of India. The word socialist has not been removed yet from the constitution; it's still there. The transformation was sudden from a state-controlled economy to global free market economy. It's still not happened 100%, but it's happening much more than expected. In the process, means and methods of communication experience the brunt of ideological conflicts superimposed by Constitution of India and electoral politics. The shift is yet to crystallize as old guards of socialist ideology continue to participate and raise their voices in electoral politics. And you simply have to go to some office and you have to tell somebody, this is the way I want to do. Rule don't permit. And then you go back and say, no, look at your new rule book. I will think about it, come back. So this is still the old mindset hasn't changed yet in the country. They continue to demand for equity of resources, reduction in economic disparities between the poor and the rich, and speak against champions of capitalism, to some extent voiced by champions of capitalism also. A new law has come in which 2% of every corporate house must contribute towards social responsibility. I want to see how it's going to work, but it is there on the rule book now. Television communication changes observed in this area, I'll finish in 5 minutes, area relate to the perception of media and telecom companies and corporations, whether government supported or privately owned. The same holds true for new readers, listeners, viewers, and mobile users. They have become consumers, as I mentioned to you. In absence of formal communication policy, print and electronic media markets are growing leaps and bounds, in which television has taken the center stage. Regional language television channels are playing an important role to inform, educate, and entertain the viewers in their mother tongues. We receive television channels in about 20 languages. You cross one language to another area, and you are in a foreign country if you open the regional channels. Rapid increase in television and telephone ownership and increased newspaper subscription. This is something very extraordinary happening in India. While in the United States of America, television newspaper buying is going down, circulation is reducing. In India, it is still increasing. My own hunch is a country which has only 13% literacy in 1947 is touching around 92%. So more and more people are buying newspapers in India today than ever before. I think this leads to horizontal spread and reach of media in the country in the near future. However, 1/3 of estimated 1.3 billion India's population is still denied access to information that has aggravated the situation. In this respect, while socialist communication has been taken over by the forces of capitalism, which seems to be partial transformation without benefit to the poor. At the same time, poor mobile phones users are diverting their meager earnings to talk instead of eating a meal. Because the market forces are advertising, you want to talk to your wife, take a phone, free, this, that. So the fellow wants 100 rupees a day, he's spending 10 rupees on mobile phone to call his wife and not eating extra chapati or bread. It has set a process of growing gulf between media poor and media rich, leading to increased economic, social, and political exploitation and economic and political control of media poor. Whether such a communication transformation will benefit the poor would remain within the realm of speculation. Thank you so much. I stop at this point. Please do raise questions.